Hi, let's talk about your most important practice of the season. That is your first practice. Now, you may be thinking a big practice before a big competition is the most important one, but the very first practice of the season is going to help you establish what your practices will be like and what your expectations are. You'll also be able to show that the expectations that you set out for your team at the beginning of the season, that you are going to stick to those expectations at that practice. So let's just go over what your first practice should look like. First of all, make your practice a practice. I think sometimes there's teams I know of that they'll do a practice and have a uniform fitting and then maybe do some goals and expectations for the year. Make all of those very specific and definite. You want your first practice to establish what is expected of your team at practice and how you are going to enforce any type of discipline. So for instance, if you have a cheerleader show up with jewelry on or not in the right attire, then you need to make sure you stick with whatever those expectations are and the consequences that come along with it. Don't chalk it up to this being the first practice, so you're going to be a little lax on it. I always recommend that you're even more strict at the beginning of the season because it's a lot harder to crack down later if they start bending the rules and pushing those boundaries. So you want to make sure that you are ready for your first practice, and the best thing that you can do is to plan your practice. And in that practice, you want to make sure that you have it very similar to what it's going to be the rest of the season. So typically, the first 15 minutes of my practices are always the same because inevitably there's going to be some little issue that arises with the school or one of the athletes having some type of issue or a parent needing something. And typically, I don't like to take care of those things at practice, but it happens. And so if your first 15 minutes of practice are always consistent and the same, your team is going to be able to go ahead and do what needs to be done. They don't have to necessarily wait on you. Now, obviously, you might still be in the room, and there's obviously things they should not be doing when you're not there, like stunting. But typically, my teams roll out the mats, and then they do a cardio warm-up, then the stretching, and then we do jumps. We do jumps every practice. I always make sure my teams have great jumps, and it's because they do them every single practice. So I have a whole sequence of what they do for those jumps. And then warming up all the tumbling that they need to do. And you may have different levels of tumblers, but I have them start off with the basics, whether that's cartwheels and round-offs, or if they're doing that, and then it goes into back handsprings and tucks, so, and further than that. So they warm up their tumbling then, so then when it's time to run a routine, they don't have to stop and say, oh, we haven't warmed up our tumbling. Then I take time for quick announcements. This is not a meeting, though. This is practice, but you will always have some quick announcements for the team, reminders that you need to let them know. And then it's time for stunts. So the first few weeks of practice, I typically work on basic stunts. I'm practicing the timing, the way you need to load, the way you need to dismount. I do the drills over and over and over, so the stunts are synchronized. And you want the basic stunts synchronized because if you can't get those synchronized, you're not going to get the advanced level stunts synchronized. So just work at whatever level that you're at. But even if you're doing elite level stunts, you should have preps and extensions and cradles all consistent and synchronized together. And then I typically work on the routine. So at a first practice, it's cleaning up the tryout dance. And I never teach a tryout dance that I'm not going to use later at a game or somewhere else. So don't just throw away the time that they spent learning a tryout dance, but typically they'll have 4 or 5 8 counts that could be repeated twice, but then I'll have them move into a stunt sequence, maybe add some tumbling into it with the music. So that's the time to work on that tryout routine and also making sure it's synchronized because you're not spending a lot of time at tryouts making sure the team is synchronized at tryouts. So that is definitely a routine you can do, and then use the routine at halftime or use it as a sideline dance. And then always leaving time at the end for conditioning. Now, it's the very beginning of the season, so your conditioning time will probably be a lot longer, and it should be a lot longer so they can start getting into shape for the year. And because you're not running really advanced routines full out at your first practice, then that gives you that opportunity to condition more. So I'm going to have this all written out as well. And if you do not subscribe to Cheer Coach Academy, then I would highly recommend that you do so on the website. If you go to cheercoachacademy.com, there's a number of free resources. So any free resource you sign up for, then you can you'll get these emails, because then I'll send you updates on the blog post. But you can go to the website and see my practice plan. You want to start off your season with a very structured practice. You don't have to be a drill sergeant, so make sure you enforce your guidelines, but at the same time, you don't have to be a jerk about it either. But if one of your athletes show up not prepared, without a water bottle or whatever it is that they've done, then make sure that you call them out on it and enforce whatever consequences you have for what they may be doing. They'll know that you're serious, and they'll know that they can't really push the boundaries with you. And if you're lax at this first practice, it's going to be a lot harder to come back later. So the main thing to do is have the right mindset to be confident when you go into that first practice. And the way you're confident is by being prepared. Know exactly what you're going to do, know how you're going to break it down, and you're going to gain a lot of respect from your team by having that practice plan in place. This is your most important practice of the season. And if you've already had your first practice of the season and you wish you would have done things a little differently, it's never too late to start over, and it's still so early in the season. So get your plan together now and get started with it. And I know it'll make a difference for you for this cheer season. Now, we have a lot of resources on the Cheer Coach Academy website, a lot of free resources, and then we also have some that have a fee to it, and that ranges from the tryout starter package, which gives you all of the materials you need for tryouts. It's mainly the paperwork, which sometimes can get overwhelming to create all of that. And then we also have Stunt School for cheer coaches. You have access to 70 stunts from beginner to advanced that you will be able to learn each stunt. They're broken down in slow motion, so you can learn how to coach each stunt. It's available on any mobile device, and you can even show your team and even project it up onto a screen at your school if you have that capability. But even just showing, holding up a tablet or an iPad, then you can show your team how to do a stunt so they can see how it's done correctly. And in stunting, that is where a lot of the injuries occur in cheerleading. So knowing how to do the stunts and coach them is really important for the safety of your team. So I recommend that you check out Stunt School as well. Thanks for all your support, and I will be back some more with tips for your first part of your season. Thanks so much. Bye.